Goshen with my wife Kara and our 3.5-year-old son Andrew Kevin, who came home from nursery school yesterday, and I asked him if he had learned anything, and he put his hand over his heart and said, "I pledge allegiance." And he said the whole thing from beginning to end without knowing what any of the words, well, not, some of the words, but then at the end he said, "with liberty and justice for all." Like, oh my God. It was, anyway, so, and for the past 18 years, the people of Litchfield County have given me the privilege of being their voice in the Connecticut General Assembly. I was born in Torrington, brought up in Litchfield. I went to Yale College and the University of Virginia School of Law. After law school, I came home to join my dad, my brother, and my sister in the family practice of law that was started by my great-grandfather in 1883. So I'm the 4th generation of my family to try to eke a living out of the hills of Torrington, and I also am from a family that has a pretty long commitment to public service and to giving back to the community. I currently am a state senator representing 15 of the 41 towns in the 5th Congressional District, and I've had that responsibility for 12 years, and it's a responsibility that I've taken seriously. It's work that I love, and I'm giving up a job that I love in pursuit of an opportunity that I hope will enable me to provide an even higher level of service to the people of Connecticut. So I'm not, I announced my candidacy for Congress on October 20th, 2011, which is about 368 days ago. And every day since I've announced, there hasn't been a day that's gone by that I haven't put some of myself into this proposition. And there's no greater gift for me than to have your attention, because would that every voter in the district would have the opportunity that all of you are availing yourselves of tonight to meet both candidates one-on-one, to ask questions of us, to hear us respond, and most importantly, to kind of get to know us a little bit better as people. So thank you for making it your business to educate yourselves about who we are, what we stand for, and what we hope to accomplish serving you in the United States Congress. So if that I stick to my 5 minutes, I'll try to
great. Just to start, Andrew, as a candidate for the U.S. House, what are your views on the role of government in meeting the needs of the elderly, the poor, and the vulnerable, including Medicare and Medicaid programs?
Well, I would start with my views as a human being before I would speak to my views as a candidate for Congress. As a human being, I subscribe to James Madison's view that government is a necessary good. Madison took the position that without government, if left to ourselves, we would be a much unhealthier society than we are when we have the benefit of government providing those things that only government can provide. So I have a long, the reality of the work that I've been doing for 18 years is, and people don't always fully appreciate this, I've been a social worker for 18 years. 6 years in the House of Representatives and 12 years in the State Senate. My number's in the book in Goshen, and people call at every hour, day and night. You can ask my wife, she says, it's 6 o'clock Sunday morning, couldn't they wait until 9? People have problems, and the job that I've had has enabled me to have a window into what's really going on in our world. And what's really going on in our world is many, many people are dispossessed, and many, many people who want to work hard, who wish to provide for their families, are in circumstances where they're not able to do what they aspire to do. So I think that one of the core functions of government, it's been one of my frustrations that we lose sight of the core functions of government, but I think one of the core functions of government is to fend for those who can't fend for themselves, to look out for people that are not able to look out for themselves. And in Hartford, one of my big pitches has been that we ought to curb what I think are excesses in many levels of our state government. I've introduced a bill to, what I don't like to see is this, in Torrington we have a food pantry. Their cupboards are bare. Our homeless shelter is overflowing. And assistance from government for those programs which serve the neediest in our society is on the chopping block. But what we've not been willing to look at is the wisdom of continuing what I think are overly, I want to put this carefully because I'm being videotaped for a TV commercial at a later date, and I want to make sure that I'm not one that's going to be used in my favor, but one that could be used against me. And so every word has to be measured against that specter. But I introduced a bill this year to change pension benefits for people that are newly hired by the state of Connecticut. I didn't want to upend the bargain that we have with any existing state employees. I didn't think that would be fair to them. But for people newly hired, I thought we could say to them that you wouldn't be able to engage in this practice called pension padding, where you take you rack up lots of overtime in your final 3 years of service, and then you use that to calculate your pension. And that system allows many people to retire in the state of Connecticut at more than base pay. So if you work in a hazardous duty situation in Connecticut, you work for 20 years, and God bless the people that do that work. It's hard work. They deserve to be well compensated. But in the last 3 years that they work, they run up the overtime, and there's an unwritten code amongst people, which they're acting rationally in their economic self-interest. They run up overtime, and then they end up retiring in their early 40s with sometimes pensions as high as $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year with full benefits for the rest of their life. Now, I'm all for that, provided it doesn't result in us reducing funding to our homeless shelters. We have to have some balance with the public resources that we invest. In my view, I said, let's change the rule for new hires. So anyone who came to work for the state would know what the new deal is. And the governor and the leaders of the union said that I was out of touch with working people, that I was callous, and it was amazing to me because we live in a time of scarcity, and I think in times of scarcity we ought to marshal our resources to support those that are in greatest need.
Thank you. Many of us in the Jewish community would like to see comprehensive immigration policy which balances security needs with appropriate long-term immigrants' ability to attain citizenship. Please tell us your thoughts on immigration policy, and do you believe it's possible for progress to be made in the next Congress?
Well, I wouldn't be running for this office if I didn't think it was possible for progress to be made. In introducing myself, I didn't give you my political stripe, but I might as well share that with you. I am a socially moderate, fiscally prudent legislator who's always had the courage to be independent and stand up to do what I think is right for the people that I serve. One of the big disappointments, and I sat in January of 2009, I sat on my couch with my wife when President Obama raised his right hand and took the oath of office, and I wished him the very best. Because if he succeeded, and I wished for him to succeed, then all of us would succeed. Our country was in a bad way, and the president brought so much energy and optimism to what our future might hold for us. And I wanted him to succeed. And I think one of the biggest disappointments was his inability to fashion comprehensive immigration reform, even when he controlled both the United States Congress and the United States Senate were controlled by members of his party. There was an inability to pass a comprehensive immigration bill. Last year we had the DREAM Act in Connecticut before the Connecticut legislature, and I voted against the DREAM Act being the bill that would allow young people who were brought here by their parents. Their parents came here in contravention of the law. The young people are blameless. They only were along for the ride. And if you review the transcript of that debate in the state Senate, I struggled with what the right answer was. But at the end of the day, I ended up voting against that bill because I heard from families in my district who were law-abiding, tax-paying citizens who thought that it wasn't fair that we would be allocating a spot at the University of Connecticut to a young person whose parents came here in violation of the rule of law at the expense of young people who have been brought up in families which have played by all the rules. And what I said in that debate was it's a little bit ironic that we're trying to fashion immigration policy piecemeal at the state level when these young people graduate from college, they're not going to be permitted to lawfully be employed by a Connecticut company. So we give them a ticket to education, but at the end of that process, there's no option for them to be lawfully employed. And what I said then, and I'll say now, the most responsible thing that we could do is prevail upon the members of Congress to pass a comprehensive immigration bill that gave these young people some kind of lawful status so that they could go to school. And when they went to school, they could graduate knowing that they could be brought into a legitimate economy and a status that was recognized by the law and by this country. So there's few people believe, I don't think it's a realistic proposition that people that have come to this country unlawfully will return to the places from whence they came. And I think we need to manage the reality that our country is facing, which is the vast majority of people that have come here in violation of the law are hardworking people who are seeking a better lives for themselves and their families. That being the case, I still think that we are a country of laws and that we should build respect for the law. And I would certainly, one of the things, I've been in the minority, by the way, I'm a Republican. I probably should have said that too, but I'm an American before I'm a Republican. And for the 18 years that I've served in Hartford, I have only been in the minority. So the only way I've been able to get things done for my district, and I've tried to get a lot of things done for my district, is by reaching across the aisle and finding common ground with people on the other side of the aisle. And so as a member of Congress, my commitment would be to work with Republicans and Democrats to, at long last, come up with a comprehensive immigration reform bill that takes away the cloud of uncertainty that hangs over all of us when we live in this world of ill-defined and a system that works for no one, as far as I can tell. Sorry, these are run-on answers, but they're open-ended questions, and I don't want to spend all this time talking. I'd much rather entertain your questions than just speak. Not that I don't have the capability of speaking. So.
Great. Andrew, how do you see the U.S. role in preventing a nuclear Iran?
Wow. One of the fun things about running for Congress has been the people that have volunteered to lend their support to my campaign. And last week, Dr. Henry Kissinger hosted an event for me in New York City. He and Mrs. Kissinger spend a lot of time in Kent, which is in my state Senate district. Mrs. Kissinger actually votes in Kent. Dr. Kissinger still votes in New York. We're trying to work on him. Mrs. Kissinger, she's a registered Republican. She says she voted for me in the primary. I think she did. We had a four-way primary to get through this process. And Dr. Kissinger was asked that question, and I give everybody's opinion weight, but I give his opinion a little bit more weight than I might give to the opinion of someone who's spent less of their life immersed in these issues. And his assessment was that within the next 9 months, it's likely that Iran may try to move their nuclear weapon production capability underground. And should they do that, it would be a very dangerous thing for all of us in the Western world. And we need to be very, very mindful of letting so much time pass that their production facilities are placed in an area that could not be reached through any means, any reasonable means. And so my view is, and what's happening right now in the streets of Tehran, I mean, the sanctions are having an effect on the populace. Food prices have doubled. There's a lot of agitation amongst the people, as you might expect. And what remains to be seen is how the leadership is going to respond to the discomfort of their people. But I'm not, to me, use of force must always be the very last resort, right? We should never, ever put young men and women, their lives at risk, unless it's the last possible option to avert a catastrophe. And the sanctions appear to be having an effect, and I certainly support the most aggressive package of sanctions humanly possible to enable the Iranians to stand down and to recognize why it is their pursuit of a nuclear weapon is about the most dangerous thing happening on the globe today. I will also say that, I guess we'll get to Israel, and I think that's the next question. Can I answer it before you? I want to answer it before it's asked, but in 2007, I was blindly nominated to participate in a nationwide fellowship sponsored by the Aspen Institute called the Aspen Rodel Fellowship. I was tapped on the shoulder and said, and notified by a congressman from Oklahoma named Mickey Edwards that I had been chosen as one of 24 young elected officials from around the country to participate in a 2-year fellowship, which brought us to Aspen, Colorado on 2 occasions, and then to China, India, Israel, Egypt, and Jordan. So there were 12 young Republicans and 12 young Democrats, including the now Attorney General of California, a woman named Kamala Harris, the president of the Los Angeles City Council, an individual named Eric Garcetti, the Bronx Borough president, an individual named Adolfo Carrion, and then on the Republican side, the current governor of Alaska, a guy named Sean Parnell, and an individual running for governor in Washington State. And we had an amazing experience, which was highlighted by our trip to Israel. And when in Israel, we met with members of parliament, defense force officials, generals, and learned, I met a guy named Steve Erlanger. Does anyone know who Steve Erlanger is?
New York Times. Yeah.
Steve Erlanger was the Jerusalem correspondent for the New York Times for a long, long time. And he was about to get out when we were there in 2008. He grew up in Waterbury, Connecticut, by the way. I spoke to a congregation in Southbury a few weeks ago, and they said, Steve Erlanger, he's from Southbury, or he's from Waterbury. He's a Connecticut guy. So when I was in Israel, I became acutely aware of just how precarious Israel's position is in the Middle East. And I think that this country has only one reliable ally in the Middle East, only one friend. And it's incumbent upon us to stand by our friend and to defend our friend from this very real threat. I think the United States and Israel should work together to make sure that Iran does not get a nuclear weapon. But I think we ought to give great deference to the Israeli military leaders as they weigh at what point their people's security can no longer be compromised. And I think we should stand by Israel as they go through that process.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Andrew. At this point, we will open it up to the audience and take your questions.
Andrew, you seem quite rational and independent, and as does your opponent, and take you at your word for the things you've done in Connecticut over in the legislature for the last 18 years. It's no secret that in Washington there's a much bigger gap between a Nancy Pelosi and a John Boehner. And given that if you were to win, I presume you would be voting to organize the House along the lines of John Boehner and the other people that would be taking leadership. Could you square that vote that you would presumably be making with some of your other views and why people in Connecticut who might be happy to vote for you independently but are in effect also casting a vote for John Boehner to lead the House? Can you explain how that would be something that people should also vote for?
Sure. I mean, I'm a bridge builder. My service has been all about building relationships with people in my own party and people in the other party. And that's the only way I know how to be. So I hope that the voters of the 5th District will look to the qualifications and character of the people that are running rather than the letter that's on their jersey. I mean, the letter that's on our jersey matters, but I don't think that the vote for speaker is going to be the most important vote that I cast. There are a whole bunch of things that I want to accomplish that go well beyond who I vote for speaker. I think that the truth is that most analysts, and you can go home tonight and go online, predict that the House of Representatives will be controlled by 30 or 40 seats by my party. John Boehner came to the Hartford Club and did an event for me 2 weeks ago. Nancy Pelosi is doing an event for Mrs. Esty tomorrow night. This is a seat that's in play. But I will say, when John Boehner came to the Hartford Club, the people that turned out to meet him were executives from United Technologies Corporation, executives from insurance companies in Hartford, leaders of business in Connecticut, who wanted to share with the speaker what policies they thought would enable them to put more people to work here in the state of Connecticut. What policies would enable them to grow their businesses, what policies would benefit the people that I wish to serve. On Friday, Congressman Bill Schuster from Pennsylvania is coming to help me. He is likely to be the next chairman of the Transportation Committee, and we're going to meet at 5 o'clock on I-84 in Waterbury to educate him about what people in the 5th District are living every day. We are. And it is, to me, my modus operandi has always been about building relationships. I will have a relationship with Nancy Pelosi. I sit next to Don Williams, the President of the Senate. He's a Democrat. He and I have worked on a whole bunch of bills together because his district and my district have the largest concentration of dairy farms. So we've fought together to protect the dairy industry in Connecticut. It didn't matter that he was a Democrat and I was a Republican. There was a problem facing our state, and together we were able to fashion a solution. And what I think is missing in Washington is the voice of the Connecticut Republican. I don't think one-party rule is a healthy thing for any state. And in this state, we're living the consequences of one-party rule. And whatever your political stripe may be, I think that the current leadership in Hartford has not, because there's been no checks and balances on the system, I think our state has been led down a path which has not helped us. And you don't have to take my word for it. UConn released a study last week that said that while other states' economies are beginning to grow and feel the signs of recovery, Connecticut's economy is shrinking. We have fewer jobs in Connecticut now than we had in 1988. And that's something that doesn't serve our families well, in my judgment. So I hope that was responsive to your question.
Well, I'd like to riff off of that question, if I could. When Republican candidates talk about reaching across the aisle, and of course we hear that all the time, whether it's in Connecticut or other states, there's an irony to that. In that you can, Republicans, as everyone knows, it's been quite an egregious obstructionist kind of Congress. We can all at least agree to that in terms of Republican strategy. So if you were elected, you're a junior congressman from the state of Connecticut. Are you really telling us that you would go against the, let's say, the directions of your party when it, let's say there's a, I know this is a hypothetical, but it's important to the people of Connecticut. Let's say there's that Obama gets reelected, but the House remains in Republican majority. Would you really go against your leadership if they had a strategy to obstruct certain legislation that the Democrat president wanted?
The only people whose approval I will seek is the approval of the people I wish to represent. And remind me of your first name again?
Flo.
Flo. And who I've been as a member of the Connecticut General Assembly is who I will be as a United States Congressman. What I've done in Hartford is what I will do in Washington. I'll give you two quick examples of my willingness to buck my party when I think they're wrong and to suffer the consequences. Example number one. I was first elected as a state representative in November of 1994. I went to Hartford, and the first big vote I was called upon to cast was on the question of whether or not there would be casino gambling in Bridgeport. It was a high priority of Governor Rowland. And the day of the vote, he called me in my legislative office, and I was a freshman, wet behind the ears. My phone rang, I picked it up. It was Governor Rowland. And he said, Andrew, I need your vote for this bill. And I said, Governor, with all due respect, I can't give you my vote for this bill. And he said, Andrew, it's very important to me. And I said, Governor, I understand, but I can't in good conscience support this bill. He said, Andrew, I will be watching. And I said, Governor, I know you'll be watching. And I voted no on that bill. And sure, there were consequences. The first consequence is I hope that the governor recognized that I was someone who was willing to stand up for what I believed and suffer the consequences, whatever they might be. The second example came on Friday, April 13th, 2007, where for the first time in Connecticut history, the Judiciary Committee, which I've served on for 18 years, took a vote on whether to legalize same-sex marriage. This was before the Connecticut Supreme Court issued its decision obligating us to do this as a state. And of the 46 members of the Judiciary Committee, only one Republican voted yes. And you may disagree with my position. You may agree with it, you may disagree with it. But I'm against discrimination. I've always been against discrimination. And in my judgment, not allowing committed same-sex couples to be married was a form of discrimination. And so I voted yes. And I was the only Republican in the entire state who voted yes. And guess what? I got some pushback, is a polite way of saying it. When I went upstairs to my leader at the time, I was not warmly received. But it didn't matter to me because I was being true to myself and true to the people that I represented. And that's party loyalty is not what I'm about. I mean, it's not my calling. And I think that the failure of Congress has been, and I think there's plenty of blame to go around. I don't park all of the blame with one party. I think there's plenty of blame to go around because it appears that partisan advantage has been the end game of political life. And I didn't get into political life believing that partisan advantage was what it was all about. I thought it was about advancing the common good. And reasonable people can disagree about what the common good is or what shape it should be. But this fellowship I did with the Aspen Institute, we had 24 of us, young, reasonably educated political leaders who focused first on diagnosing, identifying the problem. Because the facts don't lie. We as Americans, we ought to be able to identify what the problem is. And if you can agree on what the problem is, from that agreement, you can then build out, okay, if that's the problem, what are things that will ameliorate the problem? And it's amazing to me to see the failure of Congress as an institution and the members of Congress, and I say both parties of Congress, to focus on solutions which unite us instead of solutions which divide us. I'm not going to Washington to perpetuate a culture of solutions that divide us, because that's failed us. That's what's resulted in the paralysis and gridlock we have today, is people promoting solutions which divide us as a people. It's time for us to invest our energy in identifying solutions that will unite us as a people. Yes, and I wish I could remember everybody's name.
You can have
Me?
Yes. Oh, John's the moderator.
No.
I'm Harvey from Canton.
Yes.
A couple of sort of specific policy issues. If you were elected, first, would you sign the pledge that says no more taxes? Secondly, where are you in terms of what's going to get this economy fixed? And thirdly, where are you on Obamacare? If Romney gets elected and says, first day I'm going to send Congress the charge to eliminate Obamacare, where are you on that?
And let me see if I can remember all of them. Let me start with the easiest one
Yeah.
first, because I have not signed and will not sign Grover Norquist's pledge. I've never signed any pledges as an elected official. I think it's irresponsible for anyone, whatever their political philosophy may be, to sign a pledge, because none of us knows what, at least I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. If you do, Harvey, I would like some stock tips or something, you know, or which horse is going to.
I wouldn't be dressed up.
So I'd rather have, and don't think, and I ran a Republican primary. There were 4 of us in the Republican primary, and I got plenty of attacks from the right because I wouldn't sign Grover Norquist's pledge, but that's who I am, and that's, you know, I wasn't gonna obfuscate my position. I'd rather have, and Republicans were upset, some, that I wouldn't sign that pledge, but I'd rather have them be upset with me for not signing that pledge than for me to be a liar next year because I don't abide by what I think are its very unrealistic tenets. So that's number one. Number two was how to get the economy going again, which I think is the central issue. And you know, what I've learned, I'm the ranking senator on the Finance Committee in Hartford, and what I've learned, people say, have you learned anything in Hartford about, you know, that will help you in Washington? I say, well, sure, I've learned in Hartford. I don't think that the prescription the governor offered last year has lived up to what it's not delivered as advertised. I didn't think that it was prudent in the depths of the biggest economic downturn of my lifetime to impose the largest tax increase that this state has ever experienced. I just didn't think it was wise policy because I was fearful that it would have a chilling effect on economic activity and the support of small businesses, which are the engine of our economy. So I think that we live in an over-regulated society. I recognize the need for regulations, but one of the bills I worked on in Hartford was a bill, and believe it or not, we had to pass legislation to make it legal for the restaurants in Litchfield. If you've ever been to Litchfield, there's a bunch of restaurants on West Street. It was unlawful for them to go to the amazing farmers market we have. We have an unbelievable farmers market in Litchfield on Saturday mornings from 10 to 1. It's a great farmers market. It was illegal for the West Street Grill or the Village Restaurant or at the corner to go to the farmers market and buy a tomato from a local farmer to serve at their restaurant, because our health, food safety regulations were so over the top that that kind of activity was made illegal. So I think we live, and all bad laws are born good, or most bad laws are born good, but I think that we ought to try to separate the wheat from the chaff in terms of how much regulation we need in our economy and how much is too much and has a counterproductive effect on our economic growth. And I think that for the next year, we ought to maintain tax rates where they are now. We shouldn't lower any taxes, but I don't think we should be raising anybody's taxes either. I mean, the specter of the tax on dividends rising from 15% to 43% on January 1st is a pretty sobering prospect, not just for the wealthy who will pay those rates, but on anyone who receives dividend income, because dividends will not be paid out. When the dividend tax was reduced to 15%, corporations started paying out dividends. It was a sensible way for them to pay out their profits. But if the dividend rate goes up to 43%, it's going to have an effect not just on people that pay at that rate, but on everyone who receives dividends, because there will be much less dividend income going. And I think that similarly, with an increase in the tax on capital gains, that will inhibit the movement of capital, which I think is essential to building an economic recovery. So I say 1 year moratorium on current rates, and let's revamp the entire tax code. On the healthcare bill, today I'm learning all the time about it, right? I'm a policy guy, and I think it's easy. Again, we can identify the problem. The problem is we have a lot of people in our society that have no health care coverage at all. That's what I see as the problem. There are other problems. It costs too much. We overutilize in many respects. A lot of tests are redundant. But the central problem is that we as a society haven't made a commitment to make sure that everyone has access to a basic package of health care. And I've worked, in Torrington, we worked long and hard to build an FQHC, which is a federally qualified health care center. It's on Mission Avenue. I invite any of you who are in the neighborhood to stop by. It's run by Kathy Gramont. I went to Boston with the team to convince the Department of Health and Human Services to make that investment in our community, and it's doing very well. And it serves a lot of people. We're now doing dental care. So my views are colored by a lot of years of kind of hands-on experience. Today I went to Price Right in Torrington, a supermarket, and met with their management team. And they told me that the law, they now have a lot of part-time employees, people that work 20, 25 hours a week. They pay them well, and they provide them with a package of health care. It's a different package than they provide their full-time employees. And they are going to have to drop the coverage that they offer to their part-time employees because this new law won't allow them to differentiate in any way between the package they offer to their part-time employees and the package they offer to their full-time employees. It won't allow them. Right now, you have to work for a longer, if you're a full-time employee, you work 90 days, you get on the health care. If you're part-time, they make you wait a little bit longer because they want to make sure that you hang in there and that this is something that you want to do. They also have different limits on their part-time employees than they do on their full-time employees. But this bill will prohibit them from doing that. And so the net result is these individuals will probably find themselves amongst the 20 to 35 million Americans, which the Congressional Budget Office has concluded will lose their employer-sponsored health care and be left with something which is probably less good for them. The other thing that kind of, the debate I think is, there were high-minded aspirations to this bill. I'm not one who would ever maintain that the aspirations of this bill were not high-minded. But I don't think we should celebrate a bill which, when fully implemented, will leave 30 million Americans with no health care coverage whatsoever. 30 million. And this, it's not as if we're not investing heavily in this program. The program is going to cost $1 trillion over 10 years. Yeah. So the other aspect of it, just in the reality check, is in my district in North Canaan, Becton Dickinson has a plant which employs 300 of my neighbors and friends and constituents, full-time jobs in Canaan, Connecticut. They manufacture syringes, more than $2 billion a year. Becton Dickinson, the medical device tax is not even a tax on profits. It's just a tax on your receipts, whatever you take in. Becton Dickinson says that it's going to cost them $50 million a year to pay this new tax, which is money that would otherwise be used to expand their plant and equipment, to hire new people. So I think that there are certain elements of the bill that should be the centerpiece of any reform effort. Kids should be able to stay on their parents' health plan until they're 26. We made that the law in Connecticut, I think, 5 years ago, and I supported it vigorously. It makes sense. The donut hole is an abomination. I mean, whoever, when that bill passed, you had to ask yourself, what were they thinking, right? It's a policy answer that's no answer at all. It just defies any kind of rational explanation other than political compromise. But so I think the donut hole doesn't have any business in our policy firmament. And I think we should prohibit discriminating against folks on the basis of pre-existing conditions. That kind of defeats the purpose of insurance. If you say to someone with MS or ALS that because of the condition that you have acquired, you can't access health insurance, kind of runs counter to my notion of fairness. But I think we can do better than this bill. I think it was rushed through. I think there are a lot of unforeseen consequences. The Independent Payment Advisory Board is something that's scaring the heck out of me. I didn't ask the people out here what they think about it, but I've met with a lot of physicians who are very fearful of the consequences of an unelected bureaucracy prescribing what they will be paid for the work that they do. So I'm sorry to give you such a fulsome answer, but the other day we had a debate. What was it? I think it was the work that they said, in 1 minute, give us your views. And the president said, 1 minute? Oh my God, this is the most complicated policy issue we have. And you want me in 1 minute? I've gone on too long answering your question, but I want to give you a sense of the things that I think about. So my approach, and this is, if I were in charge, I think we would be better served to require each of the 50 states to come up with a plan to make sure everyone has access to a basic package of care. Massachusetts has 98% of their people covered. There are a lot of problems with their plan, but they sure tried. Oregon has had a plan for about 20 years. Their plan isn't perfect either. But I think we could learn from the successes and failures of the experiments that each of the 50 states would engage in, and hopefully replicate the successes, avoid the failures, and come up with something that will cost us less and deliver more. Yes, and you are?
Linda Merlin.
Hi, Linda.
Hi. He asked a lot of my questions, but I'm going to refine it a little. I too worry about, I understand that you've said you're a socially moderate representative, but you're going down, if you win, you would be going down to join a party that is truly extreme on the social issues. If you leave health care to the states, you have states that there's no way women will get affordable health care if you repeal. I guess, let me just get specific instead of all over the place. You said you wouldn't sign the Norquist pledge, but you would be for maintaining rates where they are. So if President Obama is elected and comes with a comprehensive bill which would raise taxes on the wealthy and do a lot of things for the deficit that you would probably be for, would you support that or not? Probably going against your party. And then just to make sure I get the second one in, the same with health care. I agree that the Affordable Care Act probably could be better. I don't agree that it should go to each state to make its own rule on health care, because that will leave so many people out. But would you vote to repeal it if your party wins, or even if they don't win, because they've already raised it 33 times to repeal it, would you vote to repeal it and leave us with nothing until something else came along? So
that's a lot of questions, Linda. I'm trying
One is, would you not join a bill that was going to raise taxes on the wealthy in the next year, on the wealthiest, but does a lot of other things you would want to do? In other words, you would compromise and work on that issue.
Linda, I'm going to Washington not to seek solutions, but to mold solutions. That's what I want to do. I want to be in the mix, molding solutions. Now, I told you what my policy belief is, that our country would be better served if we took a 1-year timeout and didn't raise anybody's taxes in the next year and didn't lower anybody's taxes, but took a 1-year timeout to revamp the entire tax code, which I think is 2,986 pages long. And there are few people that think that our tax code is an exemplar of what good policy should be. So that's my policy preference. If I'm elected to Congress and President Obama wins re-election, I'm there to do a job. No, my policy preference is my policy preference, and I share it with you because you deserve to know what my policy preference is. But don't mistake a policy preference with an ironclad unwillingness to work to solve a problem. And that's a distinction that I think is important. I'm going to play the hand that I'm dealt in the way that benefits the people of the 5th District, most importantly, but the people of our country most. So I don't rule out anything as a member of Congress. My policy preference, and understand when I talk about healthcare reform, I don't talk about saying to Arkansas, oh, do what you want, we don't care. I say Congress should direct Arkansas to come up with a plan that includes certain essential components. Among them, keeping kids on their parents' plan until they're 26. Not allowing for discrimination against people because of pre-existing conditions. So I'm not suggesting that we look the other way and leave it to the states. I think the federal government should be a partner in investing. We already do that with the Medicaid program. It's already a 50-50 program. So I'm not suggesting that we leave each state to its own devices without any direction from Congress. What I'm suggesting is that Congress should deliver a set of ground rules to the states and then let them develop plans around those ground rules and see what works, what we can afford. And I would also say, just remind people that 30 million Americans will be no better off when this plan is fully implemented than they are today. 20 to 35 million Americans will lose employer-sponsored health coverage, and big companies like AT&T and Caterpillar, Fortune 500 companies, are seriously, no one knows the impact of this bill yet because the costs haven't been fully baked in, but big companies are thinking long and hard about whether or not they are going to prefer to pay a fine and let their employees lose their health care coverage, or whether they're going to be able to provide the coverage that the bill requires. Does that help answer your question?
I see a lot of hands.
Yeah, no, I mean, it may not be, I'm not suggesting that that's the answer that you necessarily wanted to hear me say, but I tried to answer your question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Question here?
Nora from Avon. I want to change the focus a little and give you a chance to tell us where your particular passions are and trying to find out what kind of leadership role you hope to take in Congress. Perhaps you could tell us what committees you might try and get yourself on and what legislation you want to work on as you arrive there.
Well, my passion is for public service. We don't get paid a lot of money as members of the Connecticut General Assembly. When fourth graders come in, there's always a fourth grader raises their hand and says, Senator Roraback, how much do you get paid? I say, we get paid $32,000 a year, and the kid goes, wow! My family has been in this part of Connecticut for a long time.
If you don't mind me interrupting, I meant to say, what do you want to be on the Defense Committee? Do you want to be on Transportation?
Well, and I don't, my eyes are bigger than my stomach. I would love to be on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee because I think that's the committee that would give me the best ability to put the 30% of Connecticut's construction industry workers who are now unemployed back to work. And the central issue of this campaign, the central issue facing the people of the 5th District is how do folks that want to work, how are we going to find that work? Connecticut pays a lot more to the federal treasury than we get back.
Yeah.
We're getting shortchanged. And while some decry that I would, because of the letter on my jersey, would become a political caucus, whose views on social issues I publicly and emphatically disagree with, without any hesitation. But that's also the team that now is running the show, for better or for worse, whether you agree or disagree. The Republican Party controls Congress. And for Connecticut not to have a single voice in that room when decisions are made about how to invest in our transportation and infrastructure. I mean, the reason the folks from United Technologies are supporting me is because they want someone they can work with to strengthen their presence in Connecticut. And right now, they work with all the congressmen we have now, but none of them is in the majority caucus. And I speak from experience. I've been in the minority for 18 years. I know how hard it is being in the minority. And so my passion is, my success is always measured by your success. Right? My success, I'll succeed if the people in the Farmington Valley feel more secure, if they're more prosperous, if there are more opportunities for our young people. Connecticut is losing young people at a faster rate than any other state in the nation. And let me also say for the record, because some of the commercials in this campaign have been outrageously deceptive, and that's not what I've called them, that's what editorial boards of newspapers have called them. For anyone who's age 50 and older, my commitment is your Medicare and your Social Security will remain exactly as they are now. My parents are still living. I promised my parents I wouldn't mess around with their Social Security or their Medicare. I wouldn't lie to my parents. Trust me, I grew up in a household where those are kind of like non-negotiable ground rules. I wouldn't lie to them. I won't lie to you. And don't believe this rot that's running on TV. It's a real shame that the debate has been debased to what it has been. I made the mistake of running a positive ad. I don't know if any of you saw it, but I spent a lot of money running a positive ad. It's the only positive ad that's run in this campaign, in which I introduced myself to the voters and tried to share with them what my aspirations were for this job. So my passions are to see your fortunes rise, to see our kids doing better in school, healthcare available to more of our citizens, and a society that's knit together rather than a society that's driven apart.
Great. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Oh, no, and I'm sorry.
I know there's a lot of other questions that people had, but Andrew, I wanted to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I wanted to thank all of you for coming on this rainy evening, and thank again our sponsors, the Jewish Community Relations Council, the Federation, the Jewish Federation Association of Connecticut, the Mandel JCC of Farmington Valley, and the Farmington Valley Jewish Council. Hope everybody has a great evening.
And thank you for the gift of your attention. Thank you very much.
Oh, I have, if anyone's interested too, I made a bunch of copies of my APAC position paper.
I wouldn't miss it.
Yeah.
I don't want to throw them away.
Yeah, if you don't have a donut, no. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you so much.
Coming up. It's in November. Oh, it's in November. It's November. All right,
See you along the way.
All right, I'll see you in a couple days.
Somewhere along there. Take care.
Well, it's hard to see you tomorrow.